Hey everybody, welcome to the Esports Research Report. I'm Dr. Stephanie Orm from Emmanuel College in Boston.
And I'm Dr. Brian McCauley here at the Media Management Transformation Center in Jönköping, the city of DreamHack. And our guest today is actually much better than me at CSGO because she's a 5-time world champion in female leagues in CSGO, but she's also got the title of Canada's smartest person. So welcome to the podcast, Miss Harvey.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. Also happy to meet someone from the actual city of Jönköping.
Well, I'm Irish. I live in Jönköping. I learned that. I thought I was going to live in Jönköping.
Oh, it's not the sweet. Okay, so they taught you how to pronounce it well. Okay, that's it. Because I swear I've been here, I've been there, and I still don't know how to say it right.
No, it took me a couple of weeks as well. But so I'm in one of the capital esports cities in the world, and you kind of know esports, I guess. So how would you define esports, Steph/Harvey/Miss Harvey?
Yeah, usually I like to have like a very I'm not a scientist like you guys or a researcher, but I do like to have my own little twist on it, which is for me esports is competitive gaming with a purpose and a community around it, right? So the purpose is winning money, winning a prize, winning something, right? Competitive gaming, it can be about any game. I think that there's no such thing as like elitist esports games, and I do believe you need a community around it. So if you're just playing in your basement versus your brother and there's a purpose, I don't think that's esports. Yeah, it needs to be something about a community. For example, a gathering at an event, or like have people watch.
Yeah.
It needs to be a little more in depth. So that's what I would define esports. I don't know if that's the right
there is no correct definition of what we're saying. But I would say you're wrong that beating your brother at a video game is probably the peak of esports for most people and why they get into it. Just, that's the best prize. You won your titles. I beat Kevin and James sometimes. I mean, I have more prestige in my family as a result.
I like it. I'm on board. I'll add that to my definition.
But I love your inclusion of community, actually, because I think I don't know if that's something that a ton of people, because we always ask this question, as our listeners know, and I don't know that people have talked about that explicitly before.
Yeah, because I was trying to define exactly what you just mentioned, Brian, right? What's the difference between beating Kevin or and esports? And I think that's the nuance. And that's why sometimes Mario Kart isn't. But if you do a Mario Kart tournament for like at college, at a collegiate event, then maybe that's actually esports.
Yeah, no, look, I love community. I research esports from the people who are in it. That for me is why I actually like it. That's to me, it's the people who do esports are like kind of awesome. And just generally good people. You get the toxic griefers, which we'll get into, but generally majority of people who play any of the games are good fun, good crack, and they're there to have fun and connect with people. Absolutely. So, I mean, I'll ask the first question then. So we have down here, you've been a pioneer for women in esports. So you worked in game development early on Ubisoft, and then in 2003 which is a long time ago, actually. I'm not saying you're old, you're younger than me, but I mean, that's when I headed off to Australia for a year. That's a long time you've been active on the scene, and you became a pro gamer, and you said you're one of very few women in the space in that time. So what was it like in 2003 compared to 2020?
Well, I was a teenager, so that was the biggest difference, I would say. But also, I think that esports wasn't esports. I don't think we called it esports. It was just video games, right? And we were doing video game tournaments, and that was really weird for most people. People didn't really understand. Even when I started working at Ubisoft, people didn't understand a video game competition in a video game development company. So, that's how weird it was. It seems so normal now, but it really wasn't. And we were playing video games really for fun. We barely had any prize. I remember like for years I practiced over like 40, 50, 60 hours a week
Ooh.
for a chance at a gold medal once a year. And that's it, you know? It was pretty much you won like 10 grand, 15 grand for 5 people, but that's like the
Mm.
equivalent of like 1 grand that you sometimes even had to reinvest in your own traveling expenses. So it was really for we played for fun. And the
Mhm.
community was when we say that like there was an esports world and it's on the ground and it's a whole community. Well, back then it wasn't even on the ground. I can't even explain it.
Mm.
We were playing in the basements of churches a lot, school cafeterias a lot, and that pretty much were what was open and free for us to plug in all of our computers and compete.
See, I just realized I was doing esports a lot with Pro Evolution Football, where before you go out with your friends, and then there was prizes because we all put in an old Irish pound or £2 each, so you get 10
Yeah.
euros or whatever and go out. So yeah, I
Mm.
was doing esports back then. It's just not the PC based esports.
Yeah, I mean, I think arcades are really uh one of the purest form of
Mm.
the early esports days. Because of that sense of belonging and community, it was so strong there. It created still to this day one of the most flourishing genre, I think, fighting games.
Mm. Do you think that in general are the communities stronger now? Like as esports has really evolved over the last 10, 15 years. Um, do you ever kind of miss the days when it was like the church basements? Now we're talking these like huge sports arenas selling out, and it's just like night and day, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that's all been for the better?
You know what? I think you might be onto something. I think that there is something that back then was a lower barrier of entry when you
Mm.
discovered it. And well, I say that, but also free to play games really changed the deal. But there was something about playing locally with your local people and even just hanging out and not even playing that doesn't really exist in real life anymore. Yes, it transferred to the internet. It's still present in Korea, for example, but and I would say in America at least, that kind of culture really is fading away as everyone has a PC at home and just stays home.
Mm.
Actually, in Vietnam, I did a research paper on it, but a lot of people don't afford PCs. So while PC bangs are going down in Korea, they're
Yeah.
actually growing in Vietnam, and
Oh,
like
that's
it's less than
fun.
$1 an hour, and it's really tight. But you can actually sit there. I didn't know what they're saying, some terrible languages, but they were having fun, and it was actually fantastic to be able to sit in and just absorb that atmosphere that maybe
Yeah.
is missing. But that's what we get when we go to DreamHack or I'm going to the
Yeah,
Stockholm Major. I mean, I'm there
but
for the buzz.
you live there, but for my like local people, it's not something that's accessible to go to Sweden to go to a DreamHack. And outside of the DreamHack events, there's very little events like that. There is
Mm.
one in Quebec that's like uh LAN ETS that's kind of like DreamHack here. That's the same crew kind of making it happen. But other than that, at least in Canada, there is really not a lot.
Do you have esports bars in Canada? We've got Kappa Bar here. You've got Meltdown
Yeah.
Bar. Have you got that sort of where you can go play PlayStation, have a beer with your friends if you're over 18?
Yeah, you have some here, but COVID shut down a lot of them.
Yeah.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yes, that's why it wasn't great living in Shepping the last 18 months is coming back. DreamHack is coming back, but the ultimate perk of being here was gone. So you're now back with CLG as their director of franchise development and outreach. I mean,
Yeah.
what's that role about? What would you describe your job as nowadays?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you for asking. So, my job is how to fit everything that I do at CLG in one title, and it became this mashup of soup. But mainly, I work. Ironically, I do everything that's not extremely esports operation oriented. So everything that has nothing to do with our competitive teams, like their day-to-day, they're managing their performance, all that kind of stuff, I don't touch. And that was a choice. Because I'm very intense and it consumes me. And I was actually trying to, change my life a little bit. So I work on everything that has to do with the opposite of that. So all of the initiatives that we started in are so okay, wrap this up. Company culture, diversity and inclusivity, education, so from collegiate to high schools to juniors and whatnot, to every charity and philanthropic adventure that we do. A lot of our time that we give, we launched CLG Boost, which is everything that we do outside of CLG to support the community, from show up to panels, to talking in schools, to training and mentoring people. We have tournaments that we host for the amateur community that I think is so important and dear to my heart. So we launch a bunch of little tournament circuits for the amateur scene, for women in gaming and diversity, and people of diverse background and ethnicity. We also launched a bunch of broadcasts at CLG, kind of launched CLG TV in the last year and a half. So from our podcast to our tournament, we have our own like little production studio so that we don't have to outsource anything anymore. What else do I do? A lot of things. Oh, all of our allies. So our partnership with like You Can Play, which is LGBT Q plus company that supports a charity that supports diversity in sports. We're working with them to expand that to gaming, or NAMI, the National Mental Health Institute, or name it.
You do the good stuff. You're like, I don't work with the esports team. I just, I do all this, the really fulfilling, fantastic, amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Well, you might say that now, but if you think about it, before I started at CLG, most of everything that I just said was non-existent, right? So, and you don't just say, "Hey, I want to celebrate a Juneteenth at CLG," and just have a post that says Happy Juneteenth. That's really not how it should be done. And it took a long time for us to create that culture, create that understanding, that learning process of why talking about things like that matter. Why do we need to change our values from within? Why do we need to flourish and nourish our culture from within? So the things that we started from within is a bunch of little committees like D&I committee, outreach committee, learning committees where we have soft skills training for our players and our staff, where we learn about everything that I just mentioned, and we try to understand it before even doing either an activation or doing a celebration month about women in gaming, or just so like all of what we do. I want to make sure that it's genuine, and that it's something that makes sense for us, and that it's just not just like a poster thing. Just the same way that why we were one of the first organization to have a women's team back in 2015. It wasn't for marketing purposes. It wasn't because it was a trend. It was actually really weird then. And since then, we have been investing a lot of money into women in gaming. And so now what's the next steps? All right. Now that everyone is thinking about that, how can we differentiate ourselves, and how can we push the reflection further and the thoughts to just be like, well, we did our job like 6 years ago. Now what? Right. So we've seen so many challenges since that I joined, from the pandemic. Obviously, that was a pretty big challenge, which changed my role completely. But also, it in America, it started with the George Floyd murder. And then after that, I think we changed. I changed, the society changed, and we've been trying to be on board since then. So I do cry a lot in some of my meetings because we have really heart to heart discussions. And we have a very diverse staff. We almost have 50% women. We have people of color. Like, we're very, very diverse. And So everything that happens in the news will touch one of us, and we take a stand and talk about it and get vulnerable, and it's
Yeah.
hard. It's really
No.
hard. But we think it's important to do that work from within, and then after that we can be better from the outside, right, at the outside. But it's difficult to how do you say that in English?
You're
Like
getting emotional now. Like
convey. Yeah, I
Translate.
know.
you're
I'm
Yeah.
super
passionate. Like,
emotional. Yeah, it's difficult to convey the work that we've done. So that's also something we're working with our marketing team as we try, like, we keep a lot of what we do from within. So we need to try to get better at like expressing that and showing what CLG is about, which is way more than just tournaments in trying to win. It is super important to the culture of esports. You want to win, you're a competitive team. But I think what makes us unique is that it's not just about clout, about money, about winning. And I don't know a lot of organizations who are thinking that way. And so we need to do a better job, but we're working on it.
This all sounds amazing, like the different programs you're describing, and you're clearly really passionate. And so I'm glad that CLG has somebody like you leading the charge on this initiative. And I think this kind of touches on something that had come up in sort of our email correspondence, and we were kind of planning the details of the podcast. But you were talking about esports orgs sometimes treating diversity and inclusion as kind of like trendy, or, you know, as opposed to being an actual organizational value or like cultural value. And I feel like that's kind of what you're talking about, right? Is like, you know, CLG seems to have this genuine investment in these topics, right? And in these like very real issues. And so, yeah, I think, you know, this is kind of speaking to that, right? That like we a lot of organizations, you know, they put up the social media posts or whatever, and it's kind of just lip service, right? Like just kind of like, oh, here we are, we're showing up and doing it. But like I really respect what you're doing at CLG, is like putting in the work and having these difficult conversations and like actually trying to change the culture. So, I mean, that's so wonderful.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a part of me that likes the lip service, because I think no matter what, we need to talk about it. And it's better to start with that than nothing.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm loving all of these esports team picking up women teams and just like following that trend. Let's freaking go. But what I want us to do is push that to the next level. Now that we are all on board, why is CLG better at doing these kind of things? And if it's not about being better, how can we be better, right? How can we push the envelope and continue not just following that boat, but leading it? What does it mean? What's the next step now that Valorant really changed the space? So are we just like following the ride and letting Valorant dictate kind of what we need to do with our women's team, or women in gaming and diversity in gaming? Or are we again pushing it and showcasing why, you know, in 2015 CLG bought our organization United, which was one of the most successful women's team in the world.
I love the way the Valorant they claim to have 30 to 40% female players, you know, and you know, that's I know in CSGO, when I play, the women tend to not use their mic, and it's so unfortunate. And after 2,000 hours, I first heard the first sexual thing against a female friend of mine online, and it took 2,000 hours to hear "show boobies." I said something very rude to the guy in return, which I won't repeat, but you know. And she's like, my friend told me this. She's like, I prefer to play when I have someone like you, at least one friend with me, just to shut the guy up. But it was, in fairness, from starting to play a year and a half ago and doing 2,000 hours, far less toxicity than I expected to hear. It's still a problem, but I you know, and I know that's because the women aren't speaking. I think that's where it is. If they were speaking more, we'd see more of it. So I think anything that kind of pushes forward a message to stop this crap is brilliant.
I'm gonna be very blunt here. It's normal that you get it less than you thought because you're a man. And when a woman competes, she gets these kind of like show boobies.
Yeah.
Almost every single game. almost every single game.
Or when you stream as well. I was watching my friend Zitra stream, and I was messaging her going, I'm watching you stream. Are these comments normal to you? And she's like, yeah.
Yeah. It is especially in competitive shooters. It's been one of notoriously, because you need to communicate. You need to use your mic. It's been notoriously one of the worst communities when it comes to women. Not necessarily one of the most toxic community, but just really hostile to women because of the microphone usage.
Yeah, it's just such a pity. I just, it's because Mackin's way better than me. That's her CSGO handle. I don't even know. I forget her real name. Everyone in CSGO, you forget their real name. You're going, I have one friend, Tony. His name's not Tony, but that's his handle. So I ever talk to, hey, Tony. So, I mean, do you like the Game Changers initiative by Valorant then? I mean, so the whole female-only league, where do you stand on that now in 2020? Because I know this, or 21, whatever year it is, I forget now. But, like, it's always a kind of hot topic. And it's always like there's people go, it's like, they have two contrasting opinions within themselves at times. And what do you sort of stand on this now in your new role?
Yeah, I think that my stand has been pretty consistent in the last, I would say 10 years, I think they're a band-aid to a bigger problem. And in a utopia, they don't exist. But at the moment, we haven't seen anybody else do better than that. So even if they're a band-aid to a broken arm, it's better to have a brace or around your arm than nothing. And that's pretty much what was happening in the community even before Valorant, right? There was nothing else. No one was trying to do anything. And when I say no one, obviously I'm generalizing. There are people like Aniki and other organization that have been trying for a long time, but they have been swimming against the current, right? So VCT is coming in and the Game Changer Initiative is coming in, and they're doing that, but they're doing more than that, and they're trying to treat cancer with radiation. I'm gonna keep on the medical metaphor.
Why not?
Here. And they don't know if it's gonna work, but they're experimenting, and that's what we need to do. We need to experiment. We need to try. And in the end, again, I'm gonna be really blunt, but people who are against it, they don't have to participate in it, and they don't have to care for it. They can just continue with their lives and continue with their own a tournament. And this is not for them. The tournaments are not for them. Most people who complain are not women in the circuit. And so why should we care? Like, we need to care about the women who have been in the diversity. It's not just women. It's more than that for the Game Changers. We need to care about the people that it's actually for, not the people that are being detractor and negative about it.
But that's like me pointing out the window and going, hey, that guy on the street down there, he's got a hot dog. Why don't I have a hot dog? I want a hot dog. It's irrational.
It's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, of course there's a part of education and trying to get them on board. Like, hey, they have a hot dog because blah, blah, blah. And that part is fine too. And I think that's what VCT Game Changers is trying to do a lot, where they are trying to educate. And that's where people in the industry that are in high position, like Riot, can make a huge impact, because they are trying to educate. They're trying to make the space better. And even if not everyone is on board, they know what they're doing, and they're not trying to please a white cis male, and they're trying to please. They're going with their purpose. They're not trying to please everyone. They're trying to make a change. And I think before, a lot of the developers and a lot of the tournament organizers are trying to please everyone and trying to make to be liked by everyone. And I don't think that's the play. I do not think that you can please everyone when you try to make a difference.
Yeah, you can't even please everyone when you teach a class either. Doesn't matter if you give them all A's, someone will complain. It's just the way of the world.
Yeah. I totally agree. This is something that I get asked about a lot too, doing like feminist video game research. But the idea of having, specific tournaments or leagues for marginalized players. And I agree spot on with what you said about it being kind of a Band-Aid fix. And that I hope eventually we're able to move past that, right? It should just be able to be all together and all work. But the reality being is like sometimes, we need these Band-Aids until we can kind of work through those issues. So just, just to echo that, I think, I firmly agree with that. And I'm again, the big question is kind of, what is that thing that has to happen, right? How do we kind of win over those people so that we can eventually move away from those kind of isolated experiences, right? And have everything work together. And I think that's just one of the big challenges, right? A big cultural shift that has to happen in esports, but also like beyond esports, right? Like this is, earlier you're talking about George Floyd and larger culture. And I think that's something that often gets missed when researchers or even industry folks, like when we talk about these issues, we like think about gaming as a self-contained thing, right? And looking at things like Gamergate and all of that, right? We see how this is all interconnected to much larger cultural phenomenon. And so, I mean, just to say, like, just again, reiterating kind of what you already touched on, but touching on this exactly, that I think it's so much bigger than just esports, right?
I think it all comes from different misogyny on TV, the nature of pornography, the fact that the air conditioning is set to my male body temperature in most buildings.
You're the first man that's ever said that to me. I'm so happy. I usually am the one killing people's brain with that. Do you know that actually a woman's body has 1 or 2 degrees lower? So we're always freaking freezing in buildings, and you guys are, we're fine. Like, oh my God, I'm so happy you said that. I'm sure people are mind blown at home.
Oh, come on, there's a worse one. It's all medical stuff's based on men, and we are infinitely less biologically complicated. Like, it's it's like learning to fix a simple car and then working on a Ferrari. It should be the other way around.
We're Ferraris. No, I love it. We are Ferraris.
Look, I am a privileged white male, but I did do a research paper on the female experience in Vietnam as published, and it's a Confucianist culture, and it's quite misogynistic and based on old values and stuff. And then I started talking to people in esports here, and people like Female Legends, Lisa Lind and Lily and Jesper. They run this great organization that tries to include females and non-binary and other people, and it's a fantastic initiative. But I felt like I was doing a research paper on females in Vietnam again when it came to esports in Sweden, despite the fact this is a wonderful country in terms of values, but there's still gaps. It's my boss is female, my other boss is female. It's great, but it's still, even for the most equal country in the world, there's still problems, and it was kind of magnified to me in esports. And at DreamHack, and I was just talking to someone, they're going to have a lane they have a lane now in the LAN for younger girls for Female Legends, and I might be sitting in the ally lane as well, which is great. And I met Nicole there, who was looking after me last time I was there, and and it was sad that had to happen, and it was kind of like the league thing, but it was great because they also got to feel safe being there. So it's I agree with you guys. It's shit. Oops. Swearing on the podcast. It's okay, I'm Irish. But I'm allowed to say it about that.
And I mean, there's also something there where all of what you guys are saying is so true, because if let's say we were talking about collegiate esports, let's swap women esports and just say collegiate esports. We would have zero position to everything that we're trying to do, everything that we're trying to push. A collegiate tournaments only. Like, there's no one is saying like, oh, I'm not in college and I want to play in a collegiate tournament. Like, this is unfair. Like, no one is raising these flags because it's something that is natural to us. We see it in sports and whatnot. But when it comes to women in gaming, for the same initiatives, you just swap the word collegiate for women, and all of a sudden it becomes a problem. And why is that? Why are women tournament making men's hungry? Why is it? And the only difference here is really the gender versus collegiate, or versus like a country tournament too. There are countries who are restricted by their tournaments are restricted by countries, by age and whatnot. by affiliation. But when it comes to women, it's so difficult for everyone to understand the purpose of it. It's not to steal from men. It's not to because we think we're better. It's not because, it's really just incubators and that's it. It's really just to make that step a little bit easier, a little bit smaller for women to jump in.
Well, the first openly gay professional footballer came out yesterday.
Yeah.
Which is, I love seeing things like that because it shows things are moving in the right direction. And it's small gains, isn't it? I mean, esports itself was, as you said, 2003 was not even esports, and so we were launching a esport athlete program here at the university, and it kind of came to me at the end. What sports? We'll do League of Legends, we'll do FIFA, we'll do CS:GO, and I said, can we do Valorant as well? Because 30 to 40% of the player base of women, and there's much more chance to attract female esport athletes. Did I do the right thing? Was I kind of being inadvertently sexist? But I just thought, look, if there's more of a chance to engage girls in the college esports scene here, we should include Valorant as part of a scholarship program. Getting a full team might be hard, but I mean,
I think your intentions are great. No, I think they are. I think that maybe asking women like a survey on your campus about what game they would like to be in could also be an alternative. But I think just making that stance and opening that discussion that you want more women involved, and maybe these sports are heavy, or these games are heavily male dominated, and you want to make something different or bring the conversation somewhere else, is amazing.
Well, we have to get our esports space finished first. Then we'll attract more members and more women. I can't be running up to random girls. Could you play sports? Do I play Valorant? Just be, Brian, will you stop doing that? But yeah, we have to get the space, and just having the option to have Valorant there, I think, is important. League of Legends, Valorant, it's to have the platform to allow women to participate, of course, and that's maybe the key thing to the female-only leagues, is that if the space isn't there, you don't get them into the wider space in the mixed teams, and it's basic marketing, really, isn't it? What is this book you're writing?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask about.
Steph's mad about it.
So I'm actually writing 2, which is a little bit intense, and I should be focusing on promoting one. But one is in French, one is in English, and they're slightly different. The French one is more about the path that I forged, I feel, which is very unique, especially in Quebec. And it's the show that I think when I was a teenager, the job I have now didn't exist. And the passion that I had was weird, was being challenged, and I still did it. And it's more like a book about focusing on adversities in like not focusing on it, but about adversities and about challenging yourself to rethink the conception that you have, right? That you think, oh, well, that's not a real job. It's easier for us to talk about esports now, but what if it's something else that our kids are doing and that right now doesn't make sense? I was really fortunate that my parents believed in gaming, even though it made no sense. So it's more like a life story about this. And in my English one is about Cyber-Citizenship. It's straight up. And right now, the working title name is Guide to Cyber-Citizenship. So don't steal that.
Oh, you point at me like I've already got cyber balkanization there, female cyber balkanization. You don't steal that.
Yeah, I won't. I promise. But yeah,
she's going to steal it now. I know.
It's Guide to Cyber-Citizenship, and it's really. I like to say that it's a bunch of ideas and concepts that everyone knows. I'm not reinventing the wheel, but I'm putting them together in linking them with little ropes. If you know about the book The Tipping Point, it's exactly that. So I'm bringing a concept in something that you guys already know. So for me, Cyber-Citizenship, like to summarize it a little bit, is I believe that we're all cyber citizens, and I believe that we've done a great job as a society building citizens, so that all of our pillars of society around the world is pretty much to educate and train humans to become full-fledged citizens when they're 18. Like, okay, fly, you know, you're an adult now. And if you can't do that, we have systems to support you in case you fail, or you're you know, you're different, you have obstacles that other people don't have. So we kind of like support, and that's where inclusivity, equity, you know, and chances come in. On the online world, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. There's no nets, no security measures, no safety, no best practices. Your parents don't even teach you how to use it. You have absolutely no pillar in society. You're left all by yourself, and we're failing hard. Everyone individually, we're all failing. Whatever that means. Is it because you don't change your password? Is it because you are slightly a little bit addicted to social media? Is it because you express your toxicity in ways that you feel like you're invincible and you hurt people? Is it because you are hurt yourself because you can't receive a message without ruining your life and ruining your day? So we're just failing really hard at every little step of cyber citizenship. And so I talk about what I think for me are the pillars of cyber citizenship, what I think we need to start teaching, whether it's in school, whether it's educating parents, teachers, and where we need our governments to step up. And if it's not our governments, we also need companies to step up. We need overall every aspect of society to think about cyber citizenship as one of the key pillars to combating a bunch of future illness we don't know about.
Oh, it's already here, but I think this is a great sounding book. I wouldn't like to write it. It sounds really hard and really complicated, but something I want to read. But I mean, just, you know, one of my papers is what do esport actors do, and they build culture and values is one of the findings. And I think that obviously there's a lot of esports and gaming community in what you're coming at here, because that is so important to proper gamers. I say that, proper esporters, proper gamers, but you know, that the values of those sort of things are important. I mean, and I think you've actually really identified an important gap in society, to be honest. I think it's brilliant.
And you know, you guys mentioned it earlier. I don't think that gaming is the problem at all. I think that's how I started thinking about this book. You extract all the issues that you put on gaming, all the myths. You know, gaming is violent, gaming is waste of time, gaming is, you know, all that toxic is game. Like, you know, even that the World Health Organization said that cyber dependence is for video games, when it's like, remove video games. Cyber dependence is a sickness, but it has nothing to do with specifically video games. It's just like video games are one of the things you can be cyber dependent about. So to specify that it's just, anyway, you guys know more about this than me, but point is, I extracted video games out of all the issues that we're blaming video games for, and these issues still exist. You remove tomorrow video games and they still exist. And that's how my reasoning started, because if you extract all the bad issues of video game, there's only good. So I was trying to like find where they come from, and that's how I thought about the cyber.
It's like Trump saying they don't have mass shootings in Japan because they don't have video games. And no, they've got their actual own video game ecosystem and culture, and Sony and Nintendo, two of the big three, are Japanese. This is, you know, and this whole, you know, every sort of crazy ass boy racer driver loves playing Grand Theft Auto. Of course they do, because they're a crazy ass boy racer, and then they see that game and they like it. But I've never gone and, you know, mown down a bunch of citizens and, you know, killed a hooker with a baseball bat after getting out of a stolen taxi. And I've got at least 1 million virtual kills, and I've never murdered anyone that I know about. You know,
yeah. I don't know if you play CS:GO, but I remember the first time I went shooting a gun. So I'm Canadian, and obviously the gun industry is really different here than in the US. We're so close, but it's very different. And I had to go because I was working on a video game that had guns, and my boss thought it was super important that I understand what it feels like to shoot a real one. So I went to a shooting range in Canada, and like, it's a lot more complicated than in the US. And then when I experienced the training of having the weapon in my hands for the first time, I started crying like a baby. I was overwhelmed by the power of this weapon. I was already a world champion in Counter-Strike. I was shooting people for a living inside games. And I was working on a shooter as a game designer. Like I was balancing weapons. It was pretty much my life.
Yeah.
And I still cried. Like it took me 30 minutes to shoot my first bullet. I couldn't get myself to it. It was too much. It was too much for me. And that's the way I was raised here, right? Because weapons are used and seen completely differently than it is in the US. So for me, what you said, Brian, is so important. I'm the living proof that, you know, shooting people in real life is absolutely not the same as shooting people in a game.
I destroyed a coconut once in Cambodia, though, with an M16. That coconut didn't know what hit it. Actually, very few bullets hit it. I missed a lot. He said, that was great. You want to go again for another $100? I was like, no, it wasn't great. I pretty
another
much
$100.
Yeah, I know. But
wow. Wow.
That's a pricey bullet.
Yeah, well, it was a very safe coconut, I tell you that much. I don't think it hit it at all. It's like me playing CSGO at midnight. Missed.
Excuse me, I didn't get it at first when you said a safe coconut. So it just all registered.
Yeah, but the guy tries to tell the marketing professor, oh, that was great. And I'm like going, no, I know it wasn't. It's very expensive, bad thrill there.
Yeah, I was gonna say. They're like, yeah, keep trying. Oh sure. Oh my goodness.
Okay. So tell us about the company Elevey.
Yes. Yeah. So in the same vein of when I thought about this book, I thought, what can I do? Because in the book, I think it's going to be clear that for me, I think everyone should be doing something about it. Even in your own company, even if you don't work in game, like there's a little place about education for cyber citizenship. And so I thought, what can I do? And I've always, obviously, I never really had merch or clothes but I've always wanted to start something that made sense for me as a company. So even throughout my life, a lot of people approached me and it never was the right fit. And then I thought, you know what? Why don't I start a company that its whole purpose would be to educate about cyber citizenship and for me, the Miss Harvey 4Cs, which I call cyber security, cyber bullying, cyber dependence, and cyber wellness. And I think that if you talk to me again in 5 years, I'll be the Miss Harvey 8Cs, because I'm sure that they're going to keep growing and keep adding on. But for me, these are the 4 pillars that you need to be educated about. And so why don't I create a company that its own purpose is to talk about initiatives that can help you about debunking myths, about like having all the resources to get to know more about these. And one of the things that we started with last year was launch my first clothing line, which really was about having each piece a conversation piece about cyber citizenship. So for example, the next collection that we're about to come out with, we're brainstorming and right now I'm doing the creative around it. The goal is to have video game myths debunked on the collection. So one thing that I have in mind, we haven't designed it yet, but for example, I want to just show you and talk to you about it. I would like to have a unicorn somewhere in a design, because I think that one of the myths is that female gamers are far and beyond, and they're unicorns and they're one of the guys, and you know, and I think that needs to be debunked. I think that being one of the guys as a girl is not it, and being that unicorn in gaming is not it. And I want people that buy that piece to be like, hey, you know what? Actually, did you know that in Canada, 50% of gamers are women, and that 62% of the population consider themselves gamer? So pretty much 1 woman out of 2 that you meet in the street is a gamer. And so I want to have that conversation, or 1 woman out of 4. The maths, Brian, I saw your maths brains do like, was she right? Anyway.
No, but you're basically right. There's different sources. I look at these numbers. I use these numbers. You're absolutely bang on. It changes. I was going, what was the last year? This one?
Yeah. That was like in 2018 stats. But that being said, it's very interesting. And I want the people that buy the shirts to be, if someone tells them, hey, that's a cool shirt, you know what? Here's what it comes from. And on the site to have the links to the research when you buy the piece. And just like the goal is really not to sell shirts. The goal is really to have a conversation about the shirt, about what's on there, about why it matters. And yeah. So I hope that makes a little more sense about why I made Elevey.
It totally does. It totally does. I want to buy one of these like stat. So
wait,
let me
can
know.
I wear one, or is it only for it's for girls or what?
No, it's unisex, of course.
Brilliant. I'll buy one.
Of
I'll buy
course.
one on the show.
Yeah. But I think it kind of gets back to what we were talking about earlier, right? And this is actually something I've researched. I actually talked about it with comic book culture. There's so much overlap between gaming culture and comic book culture. And I actually use this metaphor of women comic book fans as unicorns, right?
Oh,
and
you
like
do. That's
all of our pop culture, like I talk about, the Big Bang Theory, right? If anyone's seen that, right? There's like a whole running joke about like, oh my God, there's a woman in the comic book shop, right? And it's like, they're so rare, these like rare elusive unicorns. And the same thing in gaming, right? And it's like, no, again, like there's tons, but why is it that we feel like there are none, right? Yeah. And I think like earlier we were talking about, women not using their mics, right? Because they want to out themselves gender wise, because we know that we're just going to get harassment and it's going to like ruin the gaming experience. Or again, like, kind of shying away from being visible in those spaces, right? So like I find that women and other marginalized genders sort of withdraw, right? Or like hide themselves and render themselves invisible because of all the toxic crap, right, that exists in that space. So
That's so well said.
I think that unicorn that's so great. I love the idea behind it. I love the heart behind it. And I love the message that's trying to spread, because this is something that I think is real and is happening. So that's so cool.
Yeah. And I have the creative debate with my team, like maybe the unicorn is breaking its horn and it's like, I want to be a horse, but then it's like, but really, do you want to like actually hide the fact that you're different? So it's like a long conversation piece. Anyway.
Yeah,
no, you get my marketing brain is going, how can
I know.
Yeah,
I know, right? And that's why I love creating these pieces, because they're so meaningful to me. And yeah, I hope that people can appreciate it too.
That's so cool.
Okay, so I want to have a bit of fun now. So you have a title, which, as I said to other Steph there, that means that by default you are the smartest person in her country as well, because Canada's a far smarter country. So you are Canada's smartest person, right? And I looked at the first episode.
Oh, you did?
It was great, and I knew you were going to win, but I was still going, I just can't get the math. Oh, go Steph, pick up the box.
Yo, my brain froze. I could not understand what was going on. Yeah,
I still don't understand what was happening, to be honest. I was going, oh, she got it. I don't know what happened. But there was a moment there, right? And I thought this was very good of you to not react, where she said, oh, so you play video games. That's not very social, is it? And I was looking at it, I was like, oh, she hid that well. And you had to go, no, I was in a team, a house with the girls, and it was very social. I mean... What did you want to say? But did you really say, oh my God, no?
Well, first of all, the hostess was like the sweetest person outside of the take. And I think that matters, right? When you have like someone that's cold or hostile who just doesn't show up on set, I'm going to be sassy. So that person was amazing. She was converting people. The set that day, it lasted 14 hours. And she was on the set all the time, not being a diva with her heels, so she was amazing. So my goal, I'm coming in and I'm in a very vulnerable position where she's awesome and she thinks I'm cool too. And so then I want to educate. I don't want to shut down or make a joke of, or so. Yeah, but I think that's a myth. And that's something that I'm working on this current collection. Is video games are antisocial. That's a complete myth. And it's the same reason you talked about porn earlier, but it's just for me.
Don't say it like that. Don't say it like that.
But it's the same reason. The show. Okay, I have a friend that wrote a book called "Why You Should Quit Porn." Yeah. And I think it's the same reason why people think video games are antisocial. We think that what we consume online is different than what we consume in real life, but it's not, our brain isn't evolved enough to understand the differences between when you watch porn or where you consume it in real life. It's the same for you, which creates that escalation of
okay, I get you. I'm
you know,
so glad I'm 40. Like I
so,
don't think I could have survived being a 9-year-old now with a smartphone. I think it's horrible. If anyone annoys me who has kids, I just tell them what their kids are watching through their friends showing them, just to make them feel scared. Because I don't have children. I'm not sure I want children in the modern era of pornography and smartphones and cyberbullying and everything. It's terrifying.
it
I think
is very terrifying. And so video games are not antisocial. People just don't know that the connections that they create in games and just overall on the internet are real. They're real, and they make a difference. And when you accept that and you think about it that way, you understand that video games are not antisocial.
Yeah, I think we're seeing like generational changes with that too, right? Like as we have more like millennials who grew up with games having their own kids, they understand, right? So they won't be like, oh, don't do that, it's antisocial, right? Or like or even game studies professors who are then teaching students like, no, actually there's a lot of pro-social benefits to games, right? So I think I feel that's going to shift, right? That's going to hopefully change, but we are still very much in a world, I know, right, where like the violence narratives and the antisocial narratives still kind of reign dominant, but fingers crossed, that we're trying to change that.
I gave away my PlayStation 4 to someone at work. I didn't realize I wouldn't be able to get a PlayStation 5, by the way. And I said, listen, your kids don't have a gaming platform. That's child abuse. Have my PlayStation 4. But it's true though. I do that panel on parents at the conference, and they want a white paper, the Parents Coalition guys. And I was sending research to one of the panelists because they need a white paper to prove to all these other bodies that games are not harmful. So all Steph are probably hitting two of you up, but that's a project that has to happen. And it's crazy that in this day and age we have to still say. And the thing is, like, boys play violent games. My daughter plays Sims, and you have to say your daughter left at least 17 people to die in a pool from starving to death. The boys went up and killed people who was shot to the head. The girls go, all right, let's set fire to the house and see what happens. Like.
I've never been able to do that in my whole life.
Really? It's the best though.
I've never been able to leave one of my Sims in the pool.
You gotta do it at least once. You just take the ladder over.
Able to do it.
No, but you've got thousands of professional kills in front of millions of people.
But there are people with no personality that I don't know about my Sim that I created.
See,
I never did it to the ones that I was like attached to, right? It was like you create
so the neighbors
like a sociopath, so you just create them with the intention of like these ones I'm just gonna kill in the pool or set fire to the kitchen.
My God.
I had a Canadian girlfriend, and in Fallout you give the old lady the chair in Fallout 4, and I put it up in the air and I had loads of guns and meat sacks around her. And I was going, hee. And my Canadian girlfriend was going, what's wrong with you? You're a psychopath. That's just a game. I'm not going to really, hang meat sacks beside old ladies in the air. Okay, so look, we're running out of time here. So Harvey, Steph, Miss Harvey, it's two Stephs confusing. But our final question is always about what research needs to be done. And so we're giving you a crack team of research. Think Steph and above me, definitely. But you've got a crack team of researchers, and you get to send them at one or two problems that you need information and you need solved for society or for esports. What would you like to see researched?
You know what? I'm very curious about the difference between women and men gamers skills. I'm very curious about that because we always people always say there's no difference between guys and girls in video games, and there's no reason why. But is it true though? Because we know that men have better reflexes. We know that that men are better at social space awareness and
parking.
For example, parking. But that women are better multitaskers. So does it mean that there's specific genres that women could be better at if you take a pool of people? I'm not saying at the peak, but generally when we create a game, are we creating games tailored for men and tailored with men's skill sets? Is there a reason why there's more women in Valorant? Because there's potentially more women that can find their own strength in the abilities of the agents that sometimes requires more different skills. Like, for example, I'm thinking Cypher. Maybe is this an agent that women like to play more because it forces you to have to be creative. It forces you to think about your traps in different ways. So if I can send a bunch of researchers, I would like to think, are we designing esports game and competitive space games for using skills that men are biologically just a little bit better at, even if it's like a tiny bit better.
Are they? Or is there a bias?
Or are they
because
not?
teachers make girls think they're worse at math and science, even though if they're better than the boys.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And there is no left brain, right brain. That's crap as well. So there's a lot of stuff maybe we have to debunk some of this stuff and build up, because
I would be really interested.
Yeah, I think I actually think they haven't really nailed that, because I looked into that, and I don't think the guys at the Lero Lab have, reaction stuff. I think that's a really good project. I'd love to be involved in that, because I think I'm going to bet that men are not better at video games. I'm going to say that some of the stuff you're saying can be disproved in the right experimental settings, and that we just believe we are, and that's why the men test better. Because if you tell students going into an exam, this is really hard, they're going to do worse. If you tell them this is a piece of piss, you're going to fly this exam, they'll get higher grades. I think when you tell girls this is a visual or spatial awareness test, I think the researcher biases them. I think their internalized beliefs bias them. I would say there's a massive field of research that'll go, actually, you know what? It's just the crap we've been throwing at them through screens and through stupid teachers.
And you know what? You might be onto something. We've been telling girls that they suck at video games for the last 20 years.
Yes.
Right? And so if we can isolate that and we can prove that they might suck because we tell them they suck, that's like, that would be at least a step.
Right.
And we would change the narrative.
Oh, I think this is really interesting. And that, like, I know I don't remember all the research off the top of my head because it's not specifically my area, but I know there's been stuff on gender differences and natural ability and things like that, which obviously, like, again, right, there's exceptions. Like, you can have a woman who's really great with spatial awareness or whatever, right? Like, those things can be trained and learned as well.
Yep.
Or bump into the door Brian, as I'm known to myself.
Yeah. But I think too, right, this idea of like better at games and stuff, you were talking about this, but like, that criteria, right, is designed around the games that we design, right? And again, I think that's a fascinating question. Like, it would make sense if, as it has been for a long time, right, a majority of these titles are still being developed and programmed by cis men, right? And so they might be coming into that with their own like skill sets kind of in mind, right? And again, like the things that feel natural to them. And so it's like this interesting self-perpetuating cycle, right? And that's going back to our question or your discussion earlier about like, are there genres of esports that women might be better at? And this is something like with collegiate programs I'm always advocating for, or your gaming clubs or whatever, is like offering all kinds of different games. Like, the classic esports titles are great, like the StarCrafts and leagues and CSGOs are great, but like also being really open to like, I don't know, farming simulator or like all the other stuff that like, I think people who may not be drawn to those other types of games for a whole host of reasons might also find and, really enjoyable and competitive, right? So like, again, all coming back to, kind of bringing it full circle, but this discussion about like culture and structural and social influences, and not just thinking about gaming as like this separate thing, right, that happens in a vacuum. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Or hear me out here. I'll bring it full circle. What if all the experiments they've done have been done in a room set for a temperature for men, and all the girls have underperformed because they've been a little bit colder and unable to perform?
I mean, all lab experiments, right? Like they're all in an artificial environment. That's like a thing. I don't think that gets gets recognized enough.
Nobel Prize. Brian made an observation in a podcast, changed the world of science as we know it. The world is saved.
All science is bullshit, says Brian.
I don't say that. I just say a lot of it is.
No.
Psychology research
yeah.
is based on psychology students who are more psychologically disturbed than your average student because they want to figure out what's wrong with them, which has been told to be by every single person who studied psychology.
Yeah. Or just primes.
This discussion is amazing. I'm so glad we're having this. This is awesome. Yes, Brian, yes. And women compete in the same rooms as men sometimes, and they're freezing and they have to compete versus these men. So yes. You see pro gamers with hand warmers. Can you imagine how cold the women in the same room is?
You see football players wearing gloves and you think, oh, he's not committed to the team in England on December.
They have hand warmers. Yeah, they even have hand warmers. Oh, I'm thinking American football.
Yeah.
Yes, again, the American gets confused. Soccer. This is the sixth podcast I've had to correct her.
All right, we're done here.
Okay. Miss Harvey, Steph too. Thank you very much. Anyone who's reading or listening, some whatever details she wants to share are below this video or podcast. So Steph, thank you very much for joining us.
It was my pleasure. This conversation was awesome. I hope I was up to the standard of this high quality podcast.
You're kind of the smartest person. How can I compete?
It was so nice to have you, though. Seriously, thank you for taking this time aside to talk with us. This was great.
Thank you so much.
Seven,